Welcome to the Twin Bill Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bolohan. Gary Morgenstein has been writing baseball books since the 1980s, but his recent trilogy is a little bit different. It's set in 2098 after America has lost World War III and baseball has been banned. But in the three books that make up the Dark Depths trilogy, A Mound Over Hell, A Fastball for Freedom, and the recent A Dugout for Peace, baseball is a force that could end up saving the world. I had a really interesting chat with Gary. I hope you enjoy. Gary, welcome to the podcast. How you doing? How's it all the way over in Brooklyn today?
Brooklyn, the center of the known universe. It's great.
I'm down in Lower Manhattan right now. I can see Jersey right now. I can't see Brooklyn, but I saw it today. I looked at it today. So yeah,
we're still here.
It's great. We have a lot to talk about. We're definitely going to talk about the Dark Depths trilogy, but this is not your first baseball book. I kind of wanted to go back to the beginning for you to talk about some of your early baseball works, a little bit about those, and work your way up here to the most recent works here. So what is your history with writing baseball books?
Well, actually, when I was a kid, I got bitten by the fever. I grew up 6 blocks from Yankee Stadium, from Mickey Mantle's shadow. And I started writing short stories when I was a little boy. I wrote about this guy named Davey, who was a shortstop for the Yankees. And, you know, I just loved baseball. My father lived in the Bronx, but was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. But I worshiped the Yankees and Mickey and all that. And my first novel was Take Me Out to the Ball Game, which was about baseball fan violence. And this was back in the early 80s. And then my second novel was The Man Who Wanted to Play Center Field for the New York Yankees. And I tried out as a publicity gimmick for the Yankees. In the novel, this failed former college athlete who tore up his knee and never quite made it. His life is a shambles. He decides he's going to try out for the Yankees. Now, back in those days, many teams had this. If you were 18 to 21, there was open tryouts. And I think they discontinued them because why bother after a while? Nothing's going to happen with it. So I was 30 at the time. My publisher thought it was a great idea, so I called up the Yankees. It was Murray Cook was the assistant farm director at the time. Then he later became general manager. He passed a few years ago. So this is a different era. This is 1983, okay? And I got Murray on the phone, and I explained what I wanted to do, and he laughed. I said, I just want to try out for the Yankees. I'm sure they're going to, invite press there. I'm not expecting contract. So, and he says, that's great. Just don't get hurt. So, okay, thank you for the boosted confidence. So now I'm 30 years old, and I was never much of a player. I was the sort of kid who dove head first, and at the end of the game, I was bleeding and bruised because I tried hard because I didn't have a lot of talent, but I always hustled. So now you're in an era where your friends, they're busy. You want to go to the batting cage, you want to play cat. No, I've got work. My wife never liked you, whatever. And so you're kind of alone. I had my young cousin I played catch with, but that was about it. So like any sensible person, I turned to God. I said, look, Mickey Mantle is not using his talent right now. It's just lying around. Lend it to me. 2 hours, I will give it back. Obviously, you can take it back whenever you want. Would you help me? Obviously, he was too busy. But I showed up at Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
The real Yankee Stadium. Mm-hmm. And the first thing we did, we stretched, and fortunately none of my limbs came off. And these kids are like 19 looking at me. And then we did a 60-yard dash, and I might still be running. It seemed. I said, all right, you don't need to be fast. Babe Ruth didn't run very fast, right? No. So then you go out in the outfield, and they hit you fly balls. And they didn't hit anything to me. I guess maybe they were afraid I would get hit in the head. It would be a little dangerous. But I was in center field with a glove. And then, the big enchilada, I get up to home plate. Now, I had been planning there'd be a human being throwing the ball so I could follow the ball.
Right.
But it was a
it's
pitching
much
machine.
Easier.
It's a pitching machine that throws me off. You know what?
I hate pitching machines. Yes. Your timing's all off.
Thank you.
It's not fair. It's not fair.
So I didn't do too well. I did hit one ball, which if it had been hit and run, guy in first, it would have gone into right field. So the press is making fun of me, but that's fine. Remember Paul Blair, the great Orioles center fielder who played for the Yankees and was a scout, and they said, what do you think of Gary? He said, well, he didn't hit one out of the infield, and he struck out a lot, so he better stick to writing, which I guess was better than saying maybe, I read his book, maybe he should try to be a baseball player. But Scott, at the end of the day, I was, at home plate at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
I was in. Wasn't like them, but I swung with the greats, and to me, that's the connection to baseball. That's what makes it so very special, so like any other sports, is the connection down through the generations, down through history, the connection with the numbers, 56, 5'11", 3,000. With respect to football and basketball, does anyone know at the top of their head how many passing yards Tom Brady got? I mean, I guess he had the most. I guess LeBron James. Who cares? But baseball has that, and I think part of the reason that baseball is no longer the national pastime is America is not a sentimental country anymore. We don't have sentiment, and you need to be sentimental. You need to believe in the magic of baseball. This way, in my novels, there's a line, one of the characters, when he goes into a real baseball stadium for the first time, he says it looks like the front lawn of heaven, and that's the green, right? It's just so beautiful, and there's just something about it, and no other sport can compare.
No, I don't, there's not that magic of going to a football field or,
No.
Arenas, basketball, hockey, they're all the
No,
same.
it's
It's just,
terrible.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I will say, when I am down at Yankee Stadium giving tours, sometimes I will go walk around just the old field.
yeah,
It's just across the street
yeah.
of where old Yankee Stadium used to be. And you do get those chills. You can still see the courthouse in center field.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
feel that connect.
Yes.
Every time I'm out there, I do feel like, man, I'm on the field at Yankee Stadium. But you actually were. That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yes.
You can say, and there are not many people in the world, you played baseball at Yankee
Yes.
Stadium. You did.
Yes. And just as a fact check, from 1983 to 96, the Yankees were not in the World Series. Perhaps if they'd signed me, who knows? Who knows? I'm just saying. I'm throwing it out there. That's a big mistake.
Look, Don Mattingly was on all of those teams. And you know what? He didn't win the World Series either. So you and him,
Yeah.
just
I love
pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that's fantastic. That's really great. So obviously baseball's been a huge part of your life. The Dark Depths trilogy. This is not what I think people would expect a baseball book. I think people have an idea of what a baseball book is. This is speculative fiction. This is sci-fi. This is very different. How does this idea come to you?
Baseball is such a rich subject, and that's why great writers, Bernard Malamud, Philip Roth, Robert Coover, on and on, have written about it because of the humanity. And yes, it's not the essential baseball, but although someone did say it was a dystopian field of dreams, and someone else said it was a 1984 meets Shoeless Joe, because since baseball is so ingrained in our hearts and minds, the idea came back in 2015. There's 3 books. Each one's about 500 pages. That's a lot of manuscript pages, as you know.
Oh, that's long. That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot, yeah. And I was having Sunday breakfast with my wife, and we were listening to the Beatles, and we had everything bagels with a schmear. And this idea popped into my head. What if America has lost World War III? We're run by someone, the country is run by someone named Grandma, and baseball begins its final season ever at Amazon Stadium. I thought, that's a bad idea. Right now I need a story and characters. And so that's essentially what it is. It's 2098. It's dystopian. And America and the West have lost World War III to the Islamic Empire. Not too timely, okay? Democracy is dead. Not too timely. And we're run by the family. And Grandma is the leader. And baseball, which is disgraced, discredited, it's associated with the old great America, the America of sentimentality, which got us into this catastrophic war, which we lost, and we're surrounded and everything. And they're down to 2 teams playing at Amazon Stadium, crumbling Amazon Stadium, formerly known as Yankee Stadium. And they have out-of-shape players are represented by athletic holograms, supervised by robot umpires, watched by 15 people. Last season, it's going to be leveled. They're tearing down Yankee Stadium, and the main characters, someone named Puppy Nedick, former college athlete, hurt his shoulder, And he has his birthday, and he's a little hungover, too much bourbon. That's still around in 2098, just to reassure people. And he stumbles over this smelly old guy who's sleeping on his floor in the living room. How did you get in here? He says, who are you? He says, I'm Mickey Mantle. He says, oh, right. Really? This is just what I need. I'm about to lose my job. Season baseball's going. But he can't bring himself to take him to the place where people think they're Mickey Mantle. A few days later, this courtly Southern gentleman shows up, says he's Ty Cobb, starts giving Puppy orders. He's like, well, what is going on? And then the third member is Mushy Lopez, she is the Shohei Ohtani of the 2050-2060s. Great switch hitter. There's a lot of female ball players, biological female ball players in the book. And baseball begins a revival. And people are suspicious because in 2065 World Series, the players who had an organization called the Miners launched a terrorist attack at the seventh game at Amazon Stadium to bring down the government, which they said wasn't prosecuting the war more firmly. So baseball was disgraced and stadiums were torn down and Hall of Fame was burnt to the ground. The custodians of memories, saved some of the relics, like all the memorabilia. Owning books was considered treason. So it took a while, but baseball eventually develops into the resistance to this totalitarian regime. And baseball comes back, but it doesn't succeed at first. It's like, it's odd. It's a novelty, and the quality of play is really bad. So at a certain point, Puppy's the commissioner of baseball, and he looks around and he says, this is terrible. This is just, no one wants to come to the games. I don't blame them. He says, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the 20th century. That's where baseball ended. 21st century, there's no analytics. There's no exit philosophy. Everything you can't, after a while, baseball, they banned the hit and run play because it was too much of a trick. You couldn't have brushback pitches because it was too rude. Couldn't take someone out with a slide. You can shift all you want, darlings. And so it galvanizes. But what baseball does at that point is the essence of baseball goes against what the government is against. So America was torn apart by polarization. So you can't go to a game and wear your Aaron Judge jersey because that's celebrity worship.
Sure.
You can't root for the home team because someone's going to get mad at you. But baseball goes against that. You can't have bobblehead day because it's a society where you must work for everything. There's no freebies. You can't have radio telecasts because partisan journalism was banned under the anti-parasite laws. And you certainly can't put it up on Facebook because social media was banned under the anti-narcissism laws, which isn't such a bad idea in 2024 maybe. But baseball galvanizes the country and actually takes on the government. But while that's going on, America and the Islamic Empire are about to start World War IV. So baseball becomes a pawn between those who want peace on both sides and those who want a nuclear holocaust. But ultimately, the boys and girls of summer saved the world because someone better.
I have a ton of questions now. Mantle and Cobb. Why Mantle and Cobb? What was it like writing for Mantle and Cobb?
Well, that's a great question because Mickey was a no-brainer. Okay, how could I? It's the novel. Most of the novel is set in the Bronx, where the seat of government moved after Washington was hit by a nuclear attack, and Manhattan was hit by a chemical attack. So that's where the government is now. How could it not be Mickey Mantle? But it was the second one. There was a challenge. I started writing and had Reggie Jackson. Now, I love Reggie Jackson's a great player, but he's boring to write. I thought of Babe Ruth, but he was too larger than life, right? It's just too much. He would just dominate a scene. I'd say, get out of here. Just stop it. Shut up. Go where you're done. But Ty, because this is a society where it doesn't matter what you are, who you are. There's no sense of like gay, straight. No one even thinks about that. Black, white. Oh, and religion is banned. But other than that, no one thinks about those things, okay? So Ty just fit in because he was not the most tolerant person. So he's looking around and, whoa, what's going on? Wait, there are two women on the subway kissing. What? So you need the culture clash of that, but eventually he comes around. as best as Ty Cobb can. But it was fun to write them.
Were you doing research on them, or did you kind of have an idea of who these characters, who were real people, were going to be?
I'd read enough about them to not have to do research. What I tried to do is I tried to do research on the Quran, Islamic culture. And one thing I'm very proud of. Now we've 1,600 published pages over 3 novels. Only one person ever accused me of being Islamophobic, which in these days,
that's
is
hard.
That's quite an achievement, right? Because when you write characters, you must write complete characters. They should not be the writer's avatars. There's always a little bit of us sprinkled, right? But they're going to do things you don't agree with, and you have to write it. You have to let that be, but you have to be respectful. Mustache twirling villains, that's easy to write. That's a superhero movie, right? But that's not literature. So I was always very careful to make it accurate, down to like foods.
This comes up all the time when I talk to authors, especially about baseball books, where they feel like if you're not getting this stuff right, people will know. Especially comes to baseball fans. Thankfully, you are a real baseball fan, and so I feel like that's less of an issue for you. But other people who are like, I had to learn some terms, I had to learn these things, because if you say one thing just a little bit off, people notice that right away.
It's funny you say that because the editor, she was young, I guess, and so in the comments, she kept saying, "I don't understand. This is not a real word. This is not a real word." I said, "It's baseball slang. Leave it. We're not changing that." But you talk about people not knowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Mushy Lopez, female player. I will probably see a female baseball player in my lifetime. And she's from what, 2050s? Is that correct?
2050s, 2060s, yeah.
Yeah. I could see that timing up just about right. And what went into her and her backstory for you? Because I find that it would have been easy to not have a female baseball player.
Boy, that wouldn't be right. Yeah. Well, she is the Babe Ruth. She is the larger than life. She holds all the switch hitting records, which really pissed off Mickey Mantle. And she had more hits than Ty Cobb, which, it did not make him happy. Well, she's also a social activist. And she led the rebellion. She led the protests against the government. And she was a pinup girl. And apparently there were calendars in both American in American and Muslim lockers, which her sliding into home in a very suggestive way. Also a singer, a great singer. So she was like the Renaissance character, and she was just a lot of fun. A lot of fun. You could, when you write, you just let them go. And I know it always sounds precious, and I'm not the first writer to say this on your podcast, but characters take over a story, right? I mean, they do. And that's trippy. No, it's really true. You're sitting there and you've written a scene and it's terrible. And then they say, "You really think I'd act like that? I'd say that? I'd do that? What's wrong with you? Get out of the way." And then they write it. "Oh, that's good. Thank you." No one really understands what goes on. I mean, where does it come from? I like to think that the door opens, okay, and they walk in. To door, I'm not going to be religious, the door to where, whatever you think. But they really are the people in your head. I was very happy about this. There's a lot of characters. That's why they never end up doing an audiobook, because I think the narrator would have collapsed of a heart attack, midway through. Just too many characters. Gore Vidal said that all writers are born with a stock company of characters. And the trick is running them in and out of wardrobe. And I was pleased that I don't really know any of these characters. I mean, I know of Ty Cobb. I met Mickey Mantle once. I could tell you that story. But these other fictional characters all came from somewhere, and they're not Gary.
Was there a character that was most enjoyable for you to write, or maybe easiest for you to write?
I think Zelda Jones, Puppy's best friend, who's a train wreck. She's one of those people. She's endearing, lovable. She was a writer, an artist. But everything she touches blows up. And but you love her anyway. And I think Zelda was really very easy for me to write. And then was most interesting when you have characters who surprise you, who, they come in briefly and you don't think they're going to stay. There's this orphan girl, Clary, who I thought was going to have just a very small role. She is being abused in a Muslim orphanage in Barcelona, and she escapes, and then she becomes one of the leaders of the country, an illegal immigrant, becomes one of the leaders of the country. And that was a big surprise. I like when the characters surprise you, or Puppy's ex-wife, Annette, who they're getting divorced when the book opens. And she was just a total pain in the you-know-what. But she grows. That's fun as a writer.
The books are obviously political. Do you think that baseball is inherently political?
They're political without being partisan. There's no mention of current politicians. And when politicians of the future mention, I don't, latch on to that. When you write dystopian literature, you're not predicting.
Right.
You're not saying this will happen. You're saying you make it feasible for the reader to say, oh, I could see that happening. I don't want democracy to die. But sometimes you say, you read polls, you see what's going on. I don't want America to lose World War III to anyone. But, you see what's going on. I mean, I chose Islam, by the way, because I thought, okay, who's America going to lose to? Right? Russia would be boring. It's Red Dawn.
We've seen it.
Exactly. China would be really boring. Okay? But Islam, this is a clash of 1,300 years already. A clash between cultures. And if somehow these two could come together, and the book ends on a hopeful note, just think of the possibilities. And yes, is baseball political? I don't think it is political per se, not currently. But you see activist athletes.
You hear a lot about baseball reflecting America, or not. And I think that there was time where that was true. And I'm not sure it necessarily is anymore. Unless maybe you want to think of today's baseball as pushing things to the extremes and trying to make the most money, trying to throw the hardest, trying to really, almost in like a extreme of capitalism kind of thing. Maybe you can make an argument. Yeah. I don't know if I would actually say it's political. I think that the league itself tries to be as unpolitical as possible. A couple of years ago when they pulled that All-Star game from it was Atlanta, wasn't it? Yeah. I was shocked that happened. That was the most sort of like overtly political thing that they've done for years. But it's interesting the values behind it.
Well, that's different. Yes, that is different, and that's what I try to reach. And that's what I try to touch. In this world, for example, patriotism is outlawed because, well, look where that led us. There's certainly not singing the national anthem, and baseball brings that back. And it kind of coalesces around the concept of America, which was lost. Now America is run by the family. That's not a country. It's a nanny state. It's, ostensibly benevolent, but it's really not. You do this, but you can't go too far. Because there was too much chaos with the old democracy. As one of my heroes, Winston Churchill, said, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others, which is a wonderful notion, but sometimes it just falls apart. There's nothing preordained that America will stay a democracy. I mean, where's that written? That America will be a world power? Tell that to the Romans.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Greeks, I mean, the Turks, on and on, the British, on and on. There's, so I think there has to be, you must contribute, you must participate. I think a country needs things to rally around. And I don't think as a country we have things to rally around. Like, we have the Super Bowl. But is the Super Bowl about football anymore? Or is it about the commercials? Right? But baseball, in its day, in its heyday, the nation gathered around. And I don't think we have that.
I actually just talked about this with someone else recently, how baseball's role in America, it's certainly not the number one sport anymore. It's certainly football. You could even probably argue basketball's ahead of it.
I think so, yeah.
I don't think you have to worry about baseball dying. I think it's going to always be around here. And they actually made a really interesting point that maybe it's okay that baseball isn't that dominant force it was. Football's easy. One game a week. You watch it and that's it. You don't have to, you're not as invested. It's an easy thing to follow. A couple hours on a weekend, that's it. You're not following 162 games. It's easy for betting. It's easy for fantasy sports. Baseball actually takes effort, and I think that's okay. I don't think it has to be the biggest sport.
Well, it takes effort, and that's one of the reasons why it's not number one anymore. Because it makes you think. It gives you time to think, and you're looking. You're looking at the field to see where they're playing the hitter and on what pitch, and you're doing the strategy along with everyone else on the field. You don't have that. You don't have that time in basketball. Who can keep up? You're barely lucky if you're watching TV. You can see who put the shot in. Around the boards. But baseball requires thought, which is why there's great literature from baseball. Why what the Twin Bill does. It's wonderful that you celebrate that and support that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. That's,
of course.
Baseball really does lead to writing in a way that other sports just don't. Not that there's not good writing about other sports, because there certainly is, but I think baseball really lends itself. I always tell people that on every single pitch, there's thousands of things happening. It's not just a guy throwing a ball. So outside corner, then you got to shift a little bit to the right, slide. So many possibilities, so many things going through each single moment there. And you lose a lot of that by just kind of watching it. But the nice thing about fiction is you can actually sort of bring these things out. You can get inside their heads. You can actually get into these things a little bit more. But it's also interesting because I can't think, and you could argue perhaps Shoeless Joe falls into the sci-fi world. It's certainly not dystopian. It's, if anything, it's the opposite.
Yes.
It's like almost this like nostalgic utopian kind of work.
Field of Dreams has the magic.
Same thing.
But
yeah.
I think I'm not going to say I might be the only dystopian trilogy.
I was wondering if you were familiar with any other dystopian baseball.
I think there was one dystopian novel that came out a few years ago. I forget the name. But in terms of doing it like this, and to having the other layers of the politics and the social currency and the philosophy involved in it, I think it's kind of unique. I say that as the writer, but critics have also echoed that it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Having actually done it now, do you have a feel for why there are not more dystopian baseball novels?
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard because you have to create a world. This is not film, okay, or TV where you have 3 shots and that's the end of the world. This is, you're governing people's lives and they're reacting to the laws. I mean, you think about writing everything when we look around that we're subject to and we can and cannot do. And so when you write a dystopian world, you have the rules and then you have to obey your own rules. Because the reader will say, well, you're taking a shortcut. And there was sometimes when I said, what did you do? I guess this is a good example. One of the characters gets pregnant. I say, all right, well. And I said, well, wait a second. This is a nanny state where the most reverential thing is family. It's called the family. There would not be abortion legal. Also, we lost 17 million people in the world, in the war, including 4 million children. You would want to restock the population. So, of course, it would be illegal. And so then that means that there can't be any single parents, single mothers. So it goes bang, bang, bang. So I say, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? My own rules led me to that, which is kind of interesting. But, you have to be consistent. And that's not that easy sometimes.
I will say one thing. I know that, especially in the last few years, there's been some changes to the game, but I do think, by and large, the game is more or less the game that's been played for the last 150 years or so. And it is nice to think that, even in the next 100 years, we'll still probably be able to recognize the game.
Yes.
And it'll still, I believe it will still have that power. And I think your books are a great example of that.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Now that you've finished the series, more baseball books?
I think I might have had my say about baseball, at least at the moment. I mean, I still have, when I do, I also write plays. So one of my characters will like baseball or something like that, but I don't know really what more I could say, for God's sakes. I mean, baseball saves the world from nuclear war.
That was Gary Morgenstein, author of the Dark Depths trilogy. The books are out now. We talk to people in and around baseball literature every week on the podcast and publish around 50 writers every year in the Twin Bill Literary Journal. You can support us on Patreon. Until next time,